Kia ora koutou, haere mai ki hui kauna hira this morning of the 25th of May 2023. For those of you who don't know me, particularly those online, my name's Lawrence Kirby and I have the pleasure of being able to chair our council meeting for today. So a warm welcome to my fellow councillors and community board members that are here this morning, to our mana whenua reps, to our acting CE, Sean Mallon, the SLT and the staff that are in the room, and also the public who have come this morning as well. And to all of those of you who are online, welcome. We hope to get through this agenda efficiently today and move into what we need to do for the rest of the day. So welcome this morning. I'm going to ask our Te Atiawa representative, Andre Baker, to open with karakia this morning.
A tēnā koe, e te rangatira, a koutou mā ngā rangatira o te kaunihera, ngā pukinga kōrero, e whakapiripiri nei, i tēnei ata. A koutou mā te whakamininga o kāpati, a hara mai nei ki tēnei huihuinga mo te ata nei, nei rāta mihi kia koutou. E whātoro ana te ngā kau kia rātou o te Waingaro, kia tau mai te manaakitanga ki runga ki tēnei huihuinga. Tāwharau tia mātou te kākahu take o te mana atua, o te mana ariki. A tuturu kia rongo whakamaua kia tēnā hui e tāki e. Just want to acknowledge those that are unwell at this time. There are people that I know we're aware of that are just generally unwell. I have staff that are unwell with COVID, so just want to respectfully acknowledge those people in our community that are unwell, and we extend our aroha to them. And I also want to just take the liberty of acknowledging the passing of Tina Turner this morning. And so those of you who can appreciate what that means, from that era of some of us sitting here who are a little bit greyer than what some others are, there's a legend that has passed, and just want to respectfully acknowledge you. So kia ora mai tātou, welcome everybody.
Kia ora, thank you, Andre. Tina is a little before my time, I'll just yeah, I know, I'm really stretching that a little bit there, so fantastic. All right, so just a couple of things to start before we get into the agenda fully. As we move through, just a reminder to all of our attenders, we're trying to work on our procedures, our tikanga for our meetings to ensure that we are doing them efficiently. So last week you were sent an email around questions that are operational or related to items of the agenda. Can we get those in to staff beforehand so we don't have to deal with those in the meeting? And we're trying to keep our questions on topic and our comments that we have. We'll probably all have comments to try and leave those in the debate section rather than in the questions section, so that we can keep ourselves walking forward and keeping ourselves moving. So just signal, I'll be aiming to head for our first break at 11 a.m. Okay, so we'll go for morning tea at 11 a.m. in terms of communicating that. All right. Thank you. Let's move into the agenda. The first thing is apologies. And we have apologies from the Mayor. Janet is in Wellington at a local government sector meeting across the country. So she's there. Councillor Coe has also given her apologies. She's on a leave of absence. And Kim Tahiwi has also sent her apologies. And just to note that Councillor Cooper has been in this morning and he will arrive late to this meeting. And we also have an apology from Denise Hapeta as well for this morning. So can I have a mover of acceptance of those apologies, please? Councillor Coford, seconded by Councillor Hanford. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay. So I've just been advised that we've got a late leave of absence that's being added to that motion that's already been moved and seconded and passed. So, and that is Richard Mansell, just to be added to that as well. So are we all happy with that? Just being added. Rob, as our motion, yeah, great. Thank you. All right, declaration of interest relating to items on the agenda. Any signals? None. Let it be noted there are none. Great, fantastic. Item 5, presentation of petition. There's nil there. Hearings, number 6, nil there. Now we move on to item number 7, which is public speaking time for items related to the agenda. So we have Mr. Peterson that is here. So I'd invite you to come forward, Conrad, and take your seat. All of you will have received an email from Conrad last week with his presentation for this morning. I've taken the liberty, it's not directly related to the agenda, but we've taken the liberty of bringing Mr. Peterson in because this is a significant submission and a significant issue for us to consider as a council. So welcome, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I prefer to stand. I don't like sitting down and speaking. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is a matter that I find of real concern. And as I mentioned, if you have my submission in front of you, under the languages paragraph, I just need to clarify something there. What I say is there are 3 official languages. Now, I'm sure that a couple of people will probably have already picked up on the fact that you control through the legislation and the regulations, English is not an official language. However, if we just quickly go back to February 1841, to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, I'm sure quite a number of people around this table will be fully aware that there were 7 copies of the treaty and that 6 of them were in English, and 6 of them were in Maori, and the 7th was in English. The English language paper was signed off by the Manukau and the Waikato chiefs. So I maintain, as a consequence of English being embedded in the treaty process, and having been from a custom and practice point of view, the most commonly used language in New Zealand, that it is therefore an official language. Thank you for allowing me to make that explanation. I have nothing further to add to my submission. I'm happy to take questions or provide any clarification if I can.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Have we got any questions from elected members? Can't see any lights coming on. Oh no, I can. There's one here from Councillor Halliday.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Conrad, for bringing this in. I was just wondering, has this paper been sent? We have a disabilities committee.
Excuse me. I can't lip read when you're looking that way. Can you look towards me, please, when you speak?
Sorry, Mr. Peterson, you didn't mention that that was a requirement for today. Are you aware that there is a disabilities committee in relation to council?
No, I'm not aware of that. Excuse me if I may, the website is quite unfriendly, and the search engine is also quite clunky and not very good at all. So to try to find out what's actually happening within council for ratepayers is quite difficult.
Okay, my suggestion was going to be that this might be a good document to come through that committee or that group with regards to advocacy and the follow-up of these points as well. I'd be quite happy to ensure it's tabled at that committee as well, just so that it's captured through a process and we can look at addressing the issues that you've got here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Any other questions for Mr. Peterson? None? Okay, so I'm quite happy just to We've already started some conversations, as I've said to you, Mr. Peterson, with staff around the issues that you raise in your submission. And I do note that you do give us 5 recommendations. So those first 4 we are looking at, those specifically related to our meetings, of which one of them is the ability for you to lip read people as they're speaking. The other thing that is just of note is that we do have a hearing loop here in chambers, but we also note that most modern hearing aids don't connect into hearing loops as such.
Yeah, my hearing aids are 3 years old. They're Swiss made and very high quality. They don't recognise hearing loops. Those are things of the past. That's old technology.
So just to reassure you, Mr. Peterson, that it is being looked at by staff, your 5th recommendation, which is related to an employee, we're referring that to the CE for further action. And as Councillor Halliday has said, we do have our Disabilities Advisory Group that can also take a look at the submission and work it a bit further and help us and guide us on how we can make our meetings the most inclusive that we can. So thank you again for your submission and taking the time to be here this morning. We appreciate that, Mr. Peterson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
I had also been informed that we were going to have another public speaker, but I can't see them here in the chambers. No, sorry. Dale Evans had said that he was going to come in this morning, but I can't see him. It's not hiding down there anywhere. Good. Okay. Right, so we can move on to members' business on the agenda.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to note in regards to Mr. Evans, he was at the community board meeting on Tuesday, the Parapara community board meeting. Carl Webber and myself made the we agreed to meet up with him to get a formal list of the issues that he has with regards to things, and we'll work through that and report back to the community board as well. And Mr. DeHaast also was going to meet up with him as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Halliday, for that update. Great, so we're moving on into members' business, which is item 8 on the agenda. First one there is leave of absence. Again, just noting if you're needing a leave of absence, you can send that request through to the Mayor. We don't need to necessarily do this. Matters of an urgent nature. There is one item that I have been made aware of in relation to this item on our agenda, matters of an urgent nature. At our Strategy, Operations and Finance meeting last week, we talked about a remit to the LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand Conference, and we put 2 resolutions were put on. There's been a bit of work that's happened in behind the scenes since then, and this has come to me today with a bit of an update and a move forward on this. When staff started the process of getting the support for our resolutions and the one regarding KiwiSaver specifically for elected members, we became aware of the fact that there was another remit that was circulating the local government arena that was pretty much exactly the same that had been formulated by Hamilton City. So the decision was, and that remit that Hamilton City has put together had support, the right number of support to get that across the line into Local Government New Zealand. So the decision was made that we would support that remit. We sent through to Hamilton City our resolutions and our wording. They have adjusted their remit slightly, the wording of it to include employer contributions, which they didn't have previously in it. So you will see on the screen behind us that there are 2 resolutions following that are updating. So those are the resolutions that we passed last week, and there is an update in B up there related to this new information that we've found. We thought it was a better look for us to support a remit that was already out rather than create our own that was just overlapping one that was already there. So if you can just take a moment to read this, and if we're happy, do you have questions, Martin?
I do.
Sorry, Councillor Halliday.
Oh, that's right. Martin's fine. I do. Just what you noted there with regards to the employer contribution aspect, that's not noted in that resolution at all. Should it be? But you have. I hadn't cited the other one, so I couldn't comment on the other one that's gone in. So I actually don't know how it's worded.
So I've just found out from Steffi that she will send out the remit, the Hamilton City remit to us, so we've got a copy of it, so that you can all see that.
Would it be worth perhaps adjourning this till after morning tea, give us a chance to have a quick read of it, and then perhaps address it then?
Have you got it on hand?
This here?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so we'll get that sent out, and I'll hold this decision until after we've had a read of that. Okay, so
We appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
we'll keep things moving. All right, great. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Okay, so we'll make a note just to move back that as we move into the rest of the agenda, I just want to foreshadow a couple of changes that are coming up in that agenda. So I've just moved one of the items that is currently 10.5 on the list, which is annual plan adoption of fees and charges. I've moved that up the list so that Steffi's 2, which are currently 10.4 and 10.6, we can put those together. So just moving up 10.5 up one. And also just to be aware in our public excluded agenda, which is later, due to staff absences due to sickness today, the property update that's listed in that agenda will not be taking place. Okay, so just to note that for those online and in the room, those couple of changes to just the order of our agenda this morning. All right, so item 9, the Mayor's report, there is none this morning to put there, so that moves us into item 10, which is our reports, and 10.1, the Waikanae Library and Service Centre, Community Engagement. So if I can invite Peter Bowman and Mike Mendoka to the stage, not quite, to come and speak to that report.
Kia ora, morena, councillors, and thank you very much for your time this morning. We think we've settled on 3 sensible options that you have before you today. You could probably argue the detail about some of those options, but all we are asking today is for your blessing to go and engage with the community. What we come back to you with in August may look quite different from all or any of these options. So, but we have a deep sense from the community and yourselves that we need to get on with it and to make some traction. So we think this is a reasonable set of options for us as a vehicle in order to do that. So I know we've discussed this in some detail in a briefing, so happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So we've got a few questions coming up. My first one is Councillor Spires.
Thank you. Just on page 6, down the bottom, note that options 2 and 3 require funding over and above the current LTP. So will that also be included in the engagement process to let people know that it will cost more for options
Yes.
2 and 3? That will. Thank you. That was all.
Thank you, Councillor Spires. Councillor Cofford.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Mike and Peter. There are quite a few alternatives here to look at. Do you think for perception and some sort of idea of what's going on, do you think some diagrammatic sort of representation would be helpful? It's quite a lot to get your head around all the alternatives. I mean, it varies from 7.3 million to 40 million, and it concerns existing buildings, potentially new buildings, 2 separate buildings with cafeterias in between, and it's quite a lot to put your head around. I was just wondering if some sort of visual assistance would be helpful.
I think that's a really good idea, Councillor, and while we don't have any great detail plan at this point, we are working on it, and we will make sure that we do take that into account as we work up the collateral that goes with the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coфord. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, nothing too major here from my end, but recently I note that the Nahapu Ōtaki opened the 4 rooms up at the Tiwananga o Raukawa with regards to a new build, and they used a concept called the Living Building Challenge. They believed that they needed to take a step by leading by example with regards to a process. My question is, I was just wondering, is council, or would council consider the Living Building Challenge as part of the process of this construction as it goes ahead?
So that's a fantastic facility up at Te Wainanga, which is a greenfield site. We're a bit different here that we're not greenfield. It's got terrific things that councillors aren't aware, like the sewage doesn't go off the site. It's everything's treated on site, and most of the stormwater remains on site as well. We don't really have that luxury in Mahara Place, but what we do have is the ability to adopt the Green Star principles, which is in the analysis. So in terms of sustainability, we can see this as being a model for sustainability of a refit of a building. But it won't be the same as a new build where you have the opportunity to redesign all the sewage and all the stormwater and everything that's under the ground as well.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
But so, Councillor, sustainability is one of the driving attributes of this project.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Number 48 refers. It's actually a question to Atiawa ki Whakarongatai, actually, to yourself, Andre. Number 48 refers to consultation that happened and is ongoing, I'm sure, with the trust. And it says the trust here is engaged with the local kāmatua and members of the Marae Trustee. Just confirming that that has occurred. Fantastic.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, it has, Councillor Halliday, to the extent of us also giving consideration to 2 suggested names. So, yeah, I can confirm that there has been satisfactory engagement from our perspective.
My other question was just confirming we've got the consultation going out from the 12th of June to the 22nd of July. Just curious to know, when would we be likely to see that come back to the table around the next step that we go through the process?
So I believe there's already a report in the forward program for August.
Right, August. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Wilson.
It's not a question, just ready to move it.
You ready to move it? Fantastic.
No more questions?
No more questions? Okay, so I've got a motion on the table from Councillor Wilson. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pravanov. It's great to see Waikanae representing. That's what we like. Excellent. All in favour? Oh, sorry, any debate? Sorry. Any debate? Would you like a right of introduction, Councillor Wilson?
No, just that the paper speaks for itself. The process so far has been really quite robust. This is a really good set of options to go out to the community. Covers all the bases, so excellent. Let's do it.
Fantastic. Councillor Halliday.
Certainly endorse the comments from Councillor Wilson there, and just wanted to note, just for public record, that we have gone through a public workshop around this. It's not a decision we're just making quickly off the cuff. There's been a lot of robust interaction with councillors in the community to get us to this point, which has been muchly appreciated.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. I'll just endorse what my 2 fellow councillors have said. Plus also, you know, this project has taken a really long time to get this stage, and I'd just like to say that good things take time.
Fantastic.
But hopefully a very short time before it actually we can go on to it. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Moore from Waikanae Community Board.
Yes, so I just want to acknowledge on behalf of the Community Board, we're really excited it's got to this crucial junction, and we're almost ready to go out to the community to engage on some options and get their involvement. And I know that they're loudly talking about this online in community forums, and at every meeting it seems to come up. And to see that building that's been sitting there for 4.5 years going to have some kind of options and they can see a timeline ahead, we're greatly enthused by that. And I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work of Mike, and Peter and his team and the documents we've seen to date. So we're really pleased at where it's got to.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'll echo those. Is there anyone else wanting to comment in debate? No, but I will echo those. This is a significant project for our Waikanae community, and it's fantastic to get it to a point where we are now out to consultation. And so I guess I want to encourage our community, particularly our Waikanae community, to engage fully in this process and have your voice heard, because this is your opportunity. And the end result could be something incredible and even more beautiful with your contribution to us. So just that invitation to put out there. So I don't see any other lights on, so that is the end of debate. So I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mike. Moving on to item 10.2 on the agenda this morning. Next report, which is the Ōtaki Social Investment. So I'll invite Janice McDougall and Emma Hexton and team.
We're having some issues with recording the presentations by Zoom, so it's very much it's not an issue. But can we just start recording via Zoom, which will make a noise when we start it?
Yeah.
So everyone can see it online?
Sure.
So you are good to go. Can you make that noise now? Okay, I'll make the noise.
It's a good
now.
moment to do.
Make a noise.
Make a noise.
We've got a GNZ that's
So
going to
just
tell them she's got
want to take this moment while the team's setting up just to welcome Huriwai online, who's joined us, our Ngāti Toa representative. Welcome, Huriwai.
Recording in progress.
Sorry, we've just had a few technical issues with the recording system, so that sound had to come through. Good timing right now, so. All right, I will hand it over to Janice to start. So just to preface these next two reports, this is the first time that we've seen these pieces of work come across this new council, and so the team is going to give a 5-minute presentation before each of the items, just to give us a bit of background and information around these two reports and the projects that sit within those, so that we're fully informed when it comes to the debate and the questions that we might ask around that. So I'll hand it over to Janice.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Morena, we're just uploading the right presentation at the moment for item 10.2, the Ōtaki Youth Space report. And while we're doing that, I'd just like to introduce the team for those of you that don't know them. We have Emma Hexton, who's been a contractor supporting this piece of work, and Claire Riwi, a senior advisor within the Connected Communities team. And we also have down the back Whetu Campbell from the Wellington Community Fund, who will be assisting us in presenting to you on our next item around the Ōtaki Equity Project. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Emma to just take you through a few very hopefully brief and succinct slides around the Ōtaki Youth Space Project, which is something that there were several engagements with the previous council on, but this is the first time in this triennium you have received an item. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your discretion in allowing us to make a few brief points in introducing the paper. Over to Emma.
Do we have a clicky on the clicker? Kia ora koutou. So the council has a role, as you know, in supporting youth development and a range of different things. There's a number of things that you do through your youth action plan. One of the things that came up in the long-term plan was allocating $50,000 for Ōtaki in terms of the development of youth space. The idea of youth space was really, really broad. It wasn't just about a physical building. So that funding was discussed with the community in terms of young people and community organisations. So young people within the kura, within the college, through Ngā Hapu o Ōtaki, young people in programs within training, and also with community organisations. So we had a hui late last year with a range of different organisations and people working with young people in different capacities. So whether it was a sports coach or a teacher or an organisation that actually works with young people. We also engaged with Zeal and KYS, who are organisations who didn't attend the hui. The hui was specifically with those who were in Ōtaki, because we'd had a strong message that they wanted to focus on for Ōtaki by Ōtaki. But we also worked and talked through the concept with Zeal and KYS as well, and have support and understanding around that. They also will be connected as we go forward with this particular project. So there are three key things in terms of the development of the youth space: somewhere to go, something to do, and some people to support. And up on the right there you can see like a few different cool icons, but basically the point there is that the youth space itself through this project is not just about a physical space. It's not just about a building, it's about Ōtaki being the space. So one clear thing that we heard from community up there is that youth space is Ōtaki community. So there's opportunity to use different places and to connect with different places. And that could be also different organisations within Ōtaki. So it could be a park or it could be going along to Māori land. That this was really important to be underpinned with youth development outcomes rather than just providing an activity for young people. So we've worked with that community and worked particularly with the provider that I'll talk about in a little bit, but there are 6 activities really that need to be undertaken over this 3-year period. So it's a 3-year pilot, and at that point we will be looking at how's that going and what is the next steps around the kind of long-term feasibility. So in terms of the first thing is obviously testing the initial youth space idea, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Providing some mobile activities, things out in the community, building rangatahi leadership, work with the community. So that's not just engaging them as we're going along, but actually connecting with those different organisations. One of the key things that through the community hui that we heard was that there are existing opportunities. There are one-off things that come up for young people in Ōtaki. There are ongoing things going on for young people in Ōtaki. Let's make sure that this project builds on that and connects those things and leverages off them. And then also evaluation. It's a pilot, so we'll be setting an evaluation framework from the beginning and gaining learning and implementing that learning as we go. And so it's not just we're starting and the end of 3 years we'll be looking. It'll be an ongoing developmental journey in terms of evaluation with the provider and with council. And then a big part of it right across the time too is investigating the long-term opportunities and options for this. So this is a short-term, 3 years might seem a long time, but it's reasonably short-term in terms of the development of a youth space, to test some different ideas with the community and build youth ownership around this. So Te Puna Oranga is the organisation that we are recommending as the organisation that provides this. The funding is $50,000 per annum, so it is a small amount of funding in terms of the delivery of this. There were 5 things that we looked at in terms of who's the best fit for delivering this project on the behalf of council. One thing was, and I mentioned before, by Ōtaki for Ōtaki was really, it was a strong theme that came through our conversations with young people and with adults. Expertise, we wanted someone that had expertise in youth development, not just in a recreational space, but actually is underpinned by strong youth development models, are guided by the Youth Work Code of Ethics and have best practice in terms of what they do around youth development. That they are connected and supported within the Ōtaki community and with iwi. So Te Puna Oranga have a very strong relationship with Ngā Hapu o Ōtaki, and strong relationships right across that community. That they were fit, and that's fit in lots of different ways in terms of, you know, the staff that they have, their availability, but also as an organisation, where are they sitting? and ready. We wanted someone who was available to do this, obviously, able to start on the ground and work alongside us to develop how this would work. In terms of a timeline, this year the focus is getting set up, building the contract with Te Puna Oranga as soon as we've moved forward with approval from council, if possible, and then getting into the growth of it. So things like this do take time. It's $50,000 is a reasonably small amount of money when you think about the provision of a youth space and a youth worker. So we're not going to see loads and loads of activities. We're going to see a small incremental development of a project in Ōtaki. There is opportunity, like I've said, there are growing opportunities. Really, that's across all sorts of things. The connections with different organisations, the connections with other funders, not to mention any in the room, and the evaluation of the first year as well. So that we can ongoing build that evaluation, that learning as we go. And then right across the place, and the next steps, we're looking at the end of that time with council, the feedback to council to show how we're going, and then where to from there at the end of the 3 years. Was that 5 minutes?
Well done, Emma. Fantastic. So, any further questions, or are we ready to happy to answer questions now? Councillor Spires.
Thank you. Just wondering, how big is the space there? Because I'm not sure how much space I'd use. Excuse me. Is there enough room for like a pool table or a table tennis table and things like that for young people too? Okay.
So the space that they're looking at has room for some activity, not necessarily a table tennis table, but the main thing around it is that the actual space within the town will be open for more like a hangout and activity space short term, and then looking at other options that we can move to as well. But the central space is not really the focus. It's more around doing activities out and about. So during winter time you might things more indoors, but they're not necessarily just indoors within the Te Puna Oranga space. They may be indoors at Māori Land, they may be indoors at the hall, or in Ngā Purapura. So there's opportunity to move around within that. So not necessarily just, it is quite small in terms of that starting pilot little space, but it is a much bigger picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be really great to hear from the young people in about 12 months' time who are using the space, to get some feedback from the young people themselves as to how they feel and if it's meeting their needs.
Absolutely.
I'd be really interested in finding that out. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Spires. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. A couple of just some things I want to touch on. The old birthright space, which is being demolished, has that been considered in any way as part of providing some space in the youth space? Is that part of the conversation at all, or is that excluded from the conversation as such?
It's not part of the conversation in terms of this test pilot, but in terms of the long-term opportunity and feasibility, there are many different options that we could be looking at. There's also, what's happening with your civic centre library space in the long term.
Yes,
there's
correct.
Conversation with Ngāhapa or Ōtaki in terms of their space. There's a range of different things. And there's many, many things when you're doing and putting, in a long-term space that you need to think about, which is there's location. There's a whole range of things around how to create a space that's fit for purpose in the long term.
Okay. When you started the conversation, you mentioned talking with the community in regards to young people. I'm assuming you talk to young people themselves as part of that process?
Yeah.
Lovely.
So there was a number of engagements, consultations with young people, workshops with young people to gauge and with a very broad look at what youth space was. So not going to them and saying, do you want a youth space in town, but actually, what does youth space mean to you? So much broad, and also with a diverse group of young people.
Fantastic. Awesome to see the relationship with Te Puna Oranga o Ōtaki. They're doing fantastic work up there, so it's great to see them building the relationship with them with regards to delivery. We've got an item coming up next around social investment funding, which I think is tied in a little bit into Ōtaki College. So as you do refer to, there are small pots of money. So we're looking at, there'll be a relationship between those two scenarios as such, or not? That's to evolve, is it?
That might be a matter to explore in the next paper.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Because that brings me up to another one. Point 42 talks about external funding opportunities. So would it be fair to say the council will be supporting this through their grants coordinator person that they have with regards to options?
Yes, absolutely. Noting that Te Puna Oranga themselves might also seek external funding to extend the scope of this work as well.
And we'd obviously support that,
Correct.
that process. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Cooper.
I just have a couple of questions, and if I'm mistaken, please let me know I'm mistaken. So page 38, number 3, a primary purpose to provide social outcomes for the community. Section 5, priority focus on activities that support activities in the community around inequity with youth.
That's the
So
next
that's
report.
sorry, Glenn. Sorry, Councillor Cooper. I made a mistake in introducing this item. My run sheet was different to the actual agenda. So we're in the Ōtaki Youth space one, which is 10.2. That question, if you can hold it to the next paper, which is 10.3, which is the one around social investment. Sounds like a great question, but we'll wait for the next one. Otherwise we've lost me. So I'll pass on now to Councillor Hanford. Did you have any questions? Sorry, Councillor Cooper, directly related to the youth space.
I'll come back if I have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councillor Hanford.
Cool. Kia ora korua. Thanks so much for all the mahi that's gone on behind the scenes on this, and also for kind of keeping myself and also Councillor Coates from last trainium abreast of the progress, and allowing us the opportunity to also kind of feed in alongside the comments from young people, specifically in Ōtaki, obviously recognising that their aspirations should very much take precedent in this conversation, because they're the ones who we're seeking to do this mahi for. So just a quick question around on page 27.46 around a communications plan, providing the framework for information to be delivered to the wider community. I guess what I'm keen to get a sense of is how we intend to make sure, but then also how Te Puna Oranga or Ōtaki intends to make sure that the word really gets out to young people as to what's on offer, because we can deliver a whole bunch of really awesome things, or Te Puna Oranga can, and we can support them to do so. But if young people don't kind of know or aren't aware of the breadth of what's happening, but also don't, as you kind of talked about, Emma, like don't feel like they have ownership over it, people might not attend, or they may not show up. So what kind of caveats are in place to make sure that happens, and that the word gets out about what's going on?
So in terms of community engagement, that's something that will be developed with the comms team. But in terms of connecting with young people, the focus for Te Puna Oranga is to connect immediately with young people before the development space. So the earlier the better in terms of developing that youth ownership, and the ultimate kind of progress towards is that young people that there are youth-led activities that happen within the space or spaces, wherever they might be, that they build, and that's what I mean by the youth leadership. It is a slow grow, so that does take time, but they already have young people that they are connected with. The other thing in relation to that is different activities connect and attract different young people. And the activity through the youth space is a way to connect with young people, and then the youth development outcomes happen through connection and the relationship with youth workers. So you don't just go along to a youth centre and go and play pool or something, and then you get the youth development outcomes. It's the relationship that they build with those youth workers, and then that youth worker finds out what's going on and connects them with other things as well. So I think the key thing is that it's early and it's involved with young people coming in and asking them, what is it you want to see, rather than deciding, right, we're going to be running this, we're going to be running that.
No, that's music to my ears. That is awesome. Just one other quick question, and you showcased this on the timeline you had up on the screen around kind of 2025 being when kind of the longer term options might be brought back in terms of external funding that could be sought, and also council's continued involvement. I guess what I'm trying to gauge is if, say, in the first year it just goes boom and we've got so many young people just leading and facilitating, their own community, and that's we're already seeing that that's delivering some awesome outcomes. Is there scope to kind of move that forward and to do, to kind of figure out what other funding opportunities there might be to just support its growth earlier on? So doing that in the first year, depending on how it goes.
Certainly, if staff in Te Puna Oranga felt that there was a growing and burgeoning need or opportunity, we would bring that forward to council. We're not going to sit and, I guess, wait for the entire 3 years of the contract to highlight opportunities. But I think I do want to go back to the point that Emma made, that it will take some time to test this, and we do want to make sure that we're following a good evaluation process too. So the caveat to, sure, if there are things that happen that we think we need to bring to your attention or change some timing around, we will. The caveat to that is, but also we want to make sure that we're being robust and following a good evaluation process, because potentially the where we might get to at the end of this 3-year trial could have some resourcing implications attached to it, and we would need to have a good evidence base for that.
Yeah.
There's also two things within that. One is around funding opportunities, and if there is something that takes off, there's no reason why that can't be developed as we go. I think there's something separately around the long-term feasibility, which relates to many things in terms of the sustainability of something. How do you make something that, if you're going to keep that 50,000 in your long-term plan ongoing, how do you make sure that that is sustainable as an opportunity ongoing? For young people, but also that if you are going to go for a fixed space and actually invest in some kind of building for part of this, how do you make sure that that is fit for purpose? And that's sometimes that's about how long, other projects are moving as well, so that will potentially take longer. So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, cool, awesome. And I definitely talk what Councillor Spires was saying around within that first year, hearing from some of the young people who are directly kind of leading or who are involved in the development of this youth space in its multitude of forms. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Mr. Butler.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Handford's enthusiasm and that we're going to have a humongous response to this, and I certainly hope so. And on behalf of the Ōtaki Community Board, we'd certainly like to thank Janice and the team that have been working on this and providing this opportunity for our youth. And also just the fact that you came out on a Wednesday evening to fill in the community board, which I know is well outside normal operating hours. Given that this is such an exciting prospect and that we can start putting this in, certainly my question would be is, when can we kick this off? What is our timeline for actually putting this in place, and can the community board sort of start putting out communications regarding this?
I think
no pressure, but
we need to formalise, if you were to support this approach today, if the council was to support this approach today, we need to formalise some arrangements with Te Puna Oranga before we can start making too many specific commitments, but certain in terms of what comms will be and when. But once that formality is taken care of, we'd be happy to work with the board to look at how we can work together to make sure there's really great awareness within Ōtaki of this new opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you again for your mahi. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Councillor Warwick.
My only question is that how do we have a plan to get information from kids who are not engaging in this as to why, what are the barriers to them coming in? And maybe, I mean, there's not a lot of money in there, to be honest, so that can be built on, but it would be good to get, I would want to see that we're actually going outside of the program to find out if and why kids aren't coming into the program. And also I'd like to move the motion once everyone's finished.
I think that would be...
That's a really good point in terms of the diversity. While it's a small community, the diversity of young people that are in Ōtaki, I think it's important to recognise there are, because this project is going to, and it's part of this is the role of council, connect with other things that are going on in Ōtaki that service different groups and different things that young people are interested in, young people in different stages of life too, because we're also talking about age difference. If you create an activity for 13 and 14-year-olds, then there's no 18-year-olds coming to that. So it's age, it's ethnicity, it's what's going on in their life stages, and then what they're interested in, skateboarding or basketball, whatever it might be. So all of those layers will be considered, but I think it's important to recognise that no one project or activity, can be there and benefit for all young people. So the idea is that the range of different things, including what Zeal does in Ōtaki, including what Māoriland does and other organisations and sports organisations, that together young people in Ōtaki will benefit from the range of youth development opportunities in Ōtaki.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Councillor Coфord.
Through the chair, Emma, thank you for your presentation. It's just great to see passionate people really getting behind a really good project for Ōtaki and Clare too. It's just wonderful to see. I don't think 50,000 is nearly enough, and it should have been done ages ago, and I'm sure you've got the full support of the council. You have Kapiti Youth Support, of course, have had a presence there for 10 years now, and people like Max Lutz, who would be very interested. He's very involved with the college, and of course Māoriland, and I think you'd get a lot of support for what you're doing, and they'd really like to dovetail into this project, and know you're wholeheartedly behind you. Thank you.
Just a comment about Kapiti Youth Support. So we met with Rachel and Te Puna Oranga and Kauai, so Rachel and Hinatu, the manager there, are meeting together soon to talk generally about what they're doing in their organisation.
That's great.
And they also do referrals as well. So there's a connection between those two organisations. There's a connection between Te Puna Oranga and Zeal as well.
Tremendous. Yeah, you've got 3 ex and present trustees of Kapiti Youth Support in a row here, so we're all behind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coфord. Mr. Baker.
Tēnā koe, Emma, Janice, tēnā koe, Claire, koutou mā. Couple of questions. First of all, just want to commend you for the work that's been done. Obviously, have a personal interest in what we need to be doing to support our rangatahi in Ōtaki. So this has, been a vision, been a desire that I know has been alive in Ōtaki for some time, about what do we do to support our young people. Interesting just mentioning Zeal and Kapiti Youth Services, because the question that I have is there going to be any duplication of funding that this council provides in igniting this project that we're talking about today? So that's the first question. And then I have a message today for council, and that is in the absence of ngā hapu being here, and I've spoken to Ms. Hapete this morning for Kim and Kirsten Hapeta. There's a desire for us to redirect this back through Art Confederation, and I want to make reference to the paper this morning, item 34 under tangata whenua considerations appropriately references young people of Kapiti. And I think prior to getting to this point, and it's acknowledged that this paper has not been before council before, neither has this been before the 3 iwi, that the early steps to get to this point had initially involved council wanting to engage with the 3 iwi about what was being proposed. So the question I have to ask on behalf of Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai, what's the benefit to our youth here? And ultimately, Ngāti Toa had the same question at the time. And I know while this is focused on Ōtaki, which I absolutely respect and support, the message today from me and from Ngā Hapu Ōtaki is, could we have an opportunity to consider this paper? I don't know, and I don't know if you know, who Te Puna Oranga is in terms of the governance structure. I'm respectfully acknowledging what's put in front of us in writing, but who provides that governance support for those people that are employed to actually deliver the services on the ground? And obviously know who those people are at an operational level, but I'm interested to know exactly who is this organisation. I would encourage the council to satisfy themselves as well that they know who this charitable trust is, what's their reputation, not wanting to be offensive or anything. I just think practically we need to know who it is that we're funding, who is it that represents the interests that we're talking about here for our youth in Ōtaki, Raukawa Te Auku Te Tonga, Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, and obviously the benefits that might be derived from this project, igniting the same opportunities for our children and our youth in Waikanae, in Paraparaumu, and Paikakariki.
Kia ora, Andre. I appreciate that input. So there is a question
point of
there.
order, Mr. Chairman. So is Andre suggesting a procedural motion to leave this on the table? Is that correct or no? So that it can be addressed?
Councillor, I'm seeking direction from the council because obviously this paper hasn't been in front of Ngā Hapu. It hasn't been in front of Tatiawa nor Ngāti Toa. And the question about time frame is important. So if a time frame is set today by you, then understandably Art Confederation would do their best to give this their urgent consideration. And I'm not wanting to delay what you're wanting to do here today because I sense there's strong support for this. But as mana whenua, we haven't seen this paper before today either. And I think it would be helpful if the opportunity was given for the Art Confederation to have the opportunity to consider this and give it their endorsement, and that's what I'm proposing. And that's why the time frame that was asked is also important in terms of the deliberations today. And I'm just conveying to the meeting, Councillor, that from Ngā Hapu Ōtaki's perspective, their message to me this morning was it would be helpful if we could caucus on this as a confederation, and I'm asking for Council to give that their consideration.
Kia ora, Mr. Baker. In answer to your question, Councillor Cooper, Andre is here as a member of this committee with no voting rights. So in terms of a procedural motion, he is unable to put that on the table. That has to come from one of us elected members who are people of this. But before we go to that, Councillor Cooper, I want to give staff an opportunity to reflect back on what Mr. Baker has raised and the questions that he's put to us today to this table.
We've had very recent conversations with Ngā Hapu or Ōtaki representatives specifically about this report and the next report within our agenda. So this is somewhat of a surprise today, so please excuse the fact that we've had a little bit of offline conversation, just trying to regroup on where things are at. Our engagement with Ngā Hapu did include a conversation with them around how the views and perspectives of Ngā Hapu would be reflected in the tangata whenua section of this report. So I think it's important to note that from the outset. Certainly, if there are concerns lingering for Ngā Hapu in relation to this, that is a matter that we should have further conversation about. At a staff level, no concerns have been flagged with us following the conversations that we had as recently as last week. So we're in the hands of the committee in terms of what your next steps are in relation to this report.
With your permission, can I respond?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, there have been no concerns at all raised by me regarding this paper, other than to say that this morning I spoke to Denise Harpiter. I've been in communication with her and Kirsten Harpiter and Kim Tahi, who are unable to be here. They're at a meeting today with Greater Wellington. Respectfully, the request is to refer this paper on so that the Confederation of Ngāti Toa, Tatiawa and Ngā Hapu can give this further consideration. regardless of the consultation that's happened to this point, which I acknowledge.
Okay. So the current advice that I've got is that we're going to move a procedural motion to leave this on the table. Staff are going to have some phone calls and some conversations with Nahapu and talk through what we can do, and then we'll bring it back hopefully later on today so that we can get a decision on this and move it forward. So, so that's what I'm proposing, and I'm happy to move that from the chair. Okay, so we'll, all right, so we'll just, okay, so I can do that. I can just adjourn this until a later moment in today's meeting rather than doing the procedural motion. So are we all happy with that from me as a chair, that we adjourn this particular debate, move it till later so we can get some clarity and some confirmation, so hopefully we can make a decision on this report today, so we can get some action in this space, because it is a significant one and there is a lot of interest in this from around the table. Councillor Wilson.
I just had a question. Yeah, I'm happy with that process. I was just wondering if is there a connection at all between Te Puna Oranga o Ōtaki and Te Puna Oranga itself from in Canterbury? There's no connection at all, just the name.
Te Puna Oranga Ōtaki is a local Ōtaki charitable trust. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's a local charitable trust.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Okay, so.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Okay. So we're just adjourning that item until we have those questions. I do have a couple of questions that I want to put to that, but I'm not sure whether I'll do that now or later. I'll do it later when we open up. I do have some questions to that particular paper, and they are related a little bit to what Mr. Baker put around the questions around the organisation and what we know of them in regards to their governance and their structure, and also how long they've been in existence, that kind of information, which is just a thing. And my other question was related to the key part of youth spaces are the people that are in them, so youth workers and my understanding of youth development success is in the length of term that you have youth workers in play for. So having the same worker for 5 years working in a space is going to get you better outcomes than one that you're contracting every year and it potentially changes. So I just want a question around that. So just signalling those questions will come later. All right, so that one's just been adjourned until later in the meeting, until we make some phone calls. So we'll move on now to, my apologies about getting the numbers wrong on this. So we're moving on to 10.3, which is Ōtaki Social Investment, the report there. So again, Emma and Janice, and can you introduce the rest of the team at yes. Sitting over here for us, so that we, so I guess the rest of the elected members know who they are. That'd be great. Thank you. Yes.
So Claire Riwi, Senior Advisor in the Connected Communities team, and Whetu Campbell from the Wellington Community Fund, formerly known as the Wellington Regional Community Trust, and they are one of the agencies that we have engaged with in developing the proposal that is before you today. So with that, I'll hand over to Emma, who, much like the last report, is just going to highlight very briefly some key points, and we may hear from our colleagues down the back as part of that.
Kia ora koutou. So like the youth space funding, there was also $50,000 put into the long-term plan in 2021 for Ōtaki to focus on addressing inequity. We've done a range of different work and exploration within Ōtaki around how this would be best, what would make the best impact in terms of that funding. So the $50,000 per annum, what we're recommending in this paper is that funding is provided to a fund holder, a local fund holder in Ōtaki, that we work alongside a set of other funders, one of which we have in the room here, who's going to talk a little bit about that, and focus on the Māori community in Ōtaki. So it would be funding, the scope of the funding would be for community by Māori in terms of the scope of this funding. The idea is to put it in place as a 1-year pilot. So pilot it for 1 year, come back to council at the end of that year and explore how that's gone, that testing. I'm going to pass it over to Whetū now, who's going to talk to us a little bit about why Ōtaki and why Māori communities are a priority for them and other funders in terms of making impact on equity specifically.
Oh, kia ora, Emma, thank you. Nā mihi niu kia koutou, ko taimana e tēnei wā. Tēnei te tuku mihi nunui ki nā rangatira e tēnei huhuna, a tīnana a huitopa, nā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Whetū tēnei. Yeah, so Wellington Community Fund is a philanthropic funder. We give out community money around the Wellington region. Our region goes from the Hapu through past Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai, past Ngāti Toa and ends up in Te Atiawa, so quite a large geographical region. Small amount of money, we give 2.5 to 3.5 million a year to all of community. And recently we undertook a bit of a research project around if with a limited amount of funding, where would our money have the biggest impact? So based on demographics, locations, needs, all of the things we know, and we research a lot. What came from that was we identified 3 locations, not to disrespect anyone else, any other locations in the region, but Ōtaki was a high-profile location, Porirua and Lower Hutt of the Hutt Valley. And the research told us if we spent more time investing in those areas with the people and populations within those areas, we'll have more bang for our buck per se. The other priority populations that came from that was Māori, Pacific, and the Mela or refugee and migrant communities. Not to say there's other needs, but they were the most likely to have the biggest impact. So our research kind of focused us to look at Ōtaki, and more recently we had a wish or a wāwata or a desire to support Ōtaki in a different way. So we partnered with a few other national funders, the Tyndall Foundation, Todd Foundation and J.R. Mackenzie Trust. And all of us put a little bit of money together and then trialled an approach to have community groups come to community themselves and then through partnership with us, how to distribute that money as chosen by them. In that case, we've got an evaluation on that's pending the report. Haven't got it quite yet, but it led us to think, how would we like to do that a little bit differently and see people like the council and others who have a strong focus in these areas, what that might look like in a 2.0 in a new pilot phase. So here really just to help answer questions or provide any comments to the paper or what Emma's going to talk through in the future. Thanks.
So the focus of the report is to seek your approval on the approach going forward. These are the 6 key elements of that approach. Working with funders who are...
Janice, can you just, sorry.
Sorry. Working with funders who are the experts within looking and funding at equity and making impact within equity. But also leverages a greater funding pool for council on top of the $50,000 that council would put into this. Utilising a local fund holder. So an Ōtaki trust that is already working in this role and has a high level trust relationship with other funders now working as a fund holder. Working from a strengths-based mana enhancing approach to terms of looking and addressing equity. So that's working with organisations and groups within Ōtaki who want to develop positive activities and reinforce their current activities rather than focus on a problem-based way of working. Locally driven. So the idea is that this is a locally driven, Whetū mentioned about the community that would be targeted in this funding being a part of that decision making. Collaborative leadership. So alongside Ngā Hapu or Ōtaki, with the funders and with council and those seeking funding, those getting funding, working together to build what this is and how the decisions are made within this. So very much a collaborative way of working. Funding for Māori initiatives. So the scope, the equity scope within this is to fund Māori organisations and groups for community initiatives. The collaborative funding process is new to council, and we just wanted to give a bit of an overview of what we're talking about. So basically local people within the scope that we're talking about, Ōtaki Māori with the equity and strengths lens, seek funding. We would have hui to work out what the plan is around that. There would be that collective, collaborative decision making within the process, and everyone reports on impact. It changes the relationship of the funder from we make the decisions, you get the funding and you report to us, to everyone works together on what is the impact, how we want to work together on this, how much money people are getting within this, and how we are reporting on this to each other. The fund holder sorts the logistics. Their role is not decision making, it's sorting the logistics, and I'll get to another quick slide about that. The fund holder role is pretty much an administrative role. It allows council to, it reduces council's administrative burden in terms of delivering this. So some of the funding might be quite small, it might be $2,000, could be $10,000. They would be the people that ensure that the forms are done, that the accountability is done. They would follow up with the grantees. They would help promote the funding, and they would support the decision makers within this. That's the current role of this organisation. They do in terms of their role. So there's a number of benefits of this approach. It allows council to be flexible and respond to evolving needs and ideas and things to address inequity within a strengths-based perspective. It leverages further funding focused on what council's interested in supporting in that community. It's an opportunity for council to learn from the experts funding within the equity space. It's a new thing for council. We're going to learn a lot. We go within this process, and we'll have the evaluation around that to help us going forward in our learning. It's a proportionate process which actually relates to that 6th point around funding best practice. And one of the key things in funding best practice is that your systems are proportionate to what the grantees have to go through. So if they are seeking $10,000, you haven't got an enormous system that they have to get through, a massive form and then a big decision-making process, and time as well is another thing, to make sure that that is reflective, that your process is reflective of what communities and organisations want to do. The reduced administrative burden, that's for both sides as well. That's for the organisations if you do proportional funding, and also for council. And overall it is in line with funding best practice and the new way that many, many funders are looking at funding going forward. So being more innovative and flexible in the way that we're funding, rather than having very tight criteria around things, an application form, and you receive your money or not, and then you report on that. Moving away from that to a much more collaborative way of working.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to it as well. One of the good things around what we learnt from while we trialled this is sometimes projects or programs or events pop up, and if they've missed a funding round, or they have to wait 6 months to apply to then for 6 months to apply for something that's happening in a month's time, it kind of doesn't help communities just kind of mobilise and create space or energy or motivation and activities in the area. So what we learned there is, because there was a bit of money available, that when the project or the program was surfaced to the fund holder, they were able to distribute money with our support quite quickly to respond to that, as opposed to having these funding round cut-off deadlines, which can sometimes for community be the biggest burden to actually do stuff, because they think about it now and they need to wait 6 or 12 months before they apply. So that was a big learning for us on that.
And in terms of the timeline, it's basically a year of testing this. So Whetū said that their previous evaluation is nearly ready to come in. We would be using that if council approved this as an approach going forward, then we would take that evaluation, work with the funders, with Ngā Hapu Ōtaki to finalise the details. At this stage, we have an approach. We need council's approval to be able to go and talk and engage with those funders and Ngā Hapu Ōtaki to bring together a more detailed plan.
Thank you, Emma and Whetū. Appreciate it. All right, so we've got the background information. You have the report in front of you. Now's an opportunity for questions. Councillor Wilson.
Just firstly, I certainly approve the approach. The current funding, a huge amount of funding actually gets taken up by the administration of giving away the funding. So yeah, certainly approve that. Just one question to Whetū, I guess. Is external funding contingent on KCDC funding?
No, it's not a contingent on KCDC funding. I think for us, and I can't speak for my other funding colleagues, but I'm pretty sure they'll have a similar worldview, is that the greater the leverage of money available to the community, the greater the projects could be. So we're keen to do a year 2 of some description, but really recognise the work that KCDC have put into kind of focusing on some Ōtaki specific things, and would really welcome the input of KCDC into what that might look like for Ōtaki. And I think the leveraging of it is probably the greatest kind of potential of KCDC's involvement.
Sorry, yeah, my red thing.
It's coming,
right,
there it
okay.
is.
Just to follow up, generally speaking with these things, 1 year becomes a bit of a scramble, and I know, I mean, you guys, you like to have forward funding programs, right? So is the 1 year, do you think is that adequate? I know it's a pilot, but...
My answer to that is it's a great start. We won't know what 12 months time would look like, because we need to figure out what community needs and the approach and what comes from the projects, and the wrap up of 12 months and what that looks like. But the 4 of us that started last year, we're like, we want to give this a go, because we see that if Ōtaki was able to kind of support Ōtaki and make decisions for Ōtaki, as opposed to us funders come in and say, here's our criteria, this is what you need to do to approach us to get money from us. It's proven there's a lot of potential there, and I think whether it be 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, I know for us as Wellington Community Fund, we've got a long-term commitment to the whole region. We're a perpetuity fund, we're not going anywhere, and for the foreseeable future we've got a strong focus on Ōtaki, Porirua and the hut. And then outside of that, we've got a really strong focus on Wawata Māori too, which is separate but it's connected to this kaupapa as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Wilson. So, Councillor Cooper, you can come back to your questions now.
I can. Just a couple of questions. I just think that the primary purpose, page 28, 3, 5 through to 19, is to provide social outcomes for the community. Priority focus on activities, support activities in the community. Then it lists inequities, and the equities in Māori, Pacific peoples, Middle East and Latin American youth, and people living in Ōtaki. Is this actually a Māori initiative for Māori at the expense of the inequity, the wider inequity in the community? Or is this just a kaupapa that helps everyone? That would be my question, my first question. Or is this,
It's for the Ōtaki community, recognising that a large percentage do have Māori or Pacifica ancestry. But it's not exclusive to, because we know that there's a strong community sense in Ōtaki, whether you're Māori or non-Māori in that region, and so this is a chance for the community to keep the relationships building as community. It just so happens that the fund holder and those who are supporting are whakapapa Māori, but I know from my understanding of whakapapa or Te Ao Māori is that will not be exclusive to Māori only. It'll be to the health and well-being of the whole Ōtaki community. So I don't see it would be exclusive to just for Māori by Māori. And I think when it comes to the equity, kind of we've had to define it ourselves as funders because lots of people are funding equity now. And for us, equity is people who have what they need to survive and succeed, access to opportunity, resources, networks, and supports that enable them to thrive. So I think for Ōtaki by Ōtaki, this meets the equity thing for us as a funder.
I just wonder whether Claire might also have comments that she wants to make in terms of the conversations that staff have had in Ōtaki, and specifically that point around where it might be targeted, but also the broader focus attached to that.
Kia ora koutou. I think the concern that it will just be for Māori in Ōtaki is not very valid, because Ōtaki and Māoridom in general have always done manaakitanga and kotahitanga to he tangata te tiriti. And so Ōtaki is a community that looks after Ōtaki, and it always will be.
Yep, and that may be so, but I think we need to be careful, all of us, in terms of stigmatising a certain element of the community and the dialogue and the discourse around that, because if we go out there and say Māori are at the bottom of the pile, I don't think that's helpful. And I think reading this report, that's the feeling and the sense I get from it. And I know that's not the case. I know that I've worked in this area extensively, and I just think we really need to be careful around stigmatising. It's actually, I'm sure you are, but the way that report read, it was sort of not. Yeah, just comment on that.
I think you can have my assurance that anything that we are involved in that is related to equity will be coming from a place of a focus on supporting and enabling people that are experiencing inequity and disadvantage, but coming from a positive place, not from a place of stigmatisation. It's just simply not the way we work.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but yeah, so we need to be careful around some of their wording.
Yep, happy to take your point on that one and assure you that we will be careful.
Do you have another question, Councillor Cooper? No? Thank you for that. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, actually take your point, Glenn, with regards to perception. It's an important thing. Look, I've got two things. One of them, I just want to get some clarity. Both of them actually clarity issues. I just want to get an idea where this money sits. I have no issues with any of this, but it's going to be sitting in the Ōtaki Education Trust. Is that correct? And that works in partnership with Ōtaki College. All the schools, is it? I went into the websites and stuff, and it seemed to me that was not that I have an issue with that. I'm just curious where it sits. They've got it works in partnership with, and comforting to know that Kim sits on that board of trustees as well, so it's good linkage there. I notice here there's multiple funders, if you like, the J.A. Mackenzie Trust, and that works through a thing called Ngā Kai Ko Kiri, and that ties into the Māorilands Charitable Trust. Or is this? I guess what I'm trying to. A lot of different pots of money head towards Ōtaki, and I like the idea that it's going to a central spot with regards to cutting down administration and with regards to that, because I think it gets a bit confusing, to be honest, with regards to things. So I think this is a great initiative with regards to addressing that issue, and I think saving on a lot of administration costs and that sort of scenario there as well. But is that the general idea, is to move this forward in that sort of direction, to try and get these little pots heading in that direction to be better utilised in the Ōtaki community?
Leveraging the opportunity that comes from combining little pots to make bigger pots is absolutely what lies behind this proposal.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's fine with that, and I'm cool with that. The other thing I wanted to do, I just wanted to clarify something. In 10.2, we're talking about a youth space that has funding from the long-term plan, and that was $50,000. It was put in as an extra, and it is youth space specific. 10.3 is equity funding for Ōtaki, and that was added to the social investment fund on top of the investment fund with regards to equity funding. Is that right?
Correct. Two
Thank you.
separate funding decisions relating to two separate initiatives.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I just want to make that very, very clear with regards to things. Okay, thank you very much. That's me. Thank you. Oh, and awesome work. Thank you very much for the money.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Sorry.
So I just want to mention too that this is not the only investment that Wellington Community Fund is putting into Ōtaki. So if there are groups out there who still want to go through the traditional channels of philanthropic funding for different kaupapa and things that are happening in Ōtaki, the philanthropic funders in Wellington are still available to them. It's not the only thing that we're doing. And to give you an example, along with the 50,000 that we put in last year to get this kind of approach tested, we still invested over 200,000 into Ōtaki. So it's not just one or the other. It's we want to try and let Ōtaki make decisions and support decisions for themselves while still supporting wider initiatives should they come through the traditional philanthropic funding as well. So it's not the only thing that we do.
Thank you. Mr. Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just because of this being a new concept for the council, just wondering if you could expand a little bit on the concept of the Ngā Kai Kōkore and who you would envisage being actually in that group.
So Ngā Kai Kōkore is a term used for basically the choosers. And that is a phrase that J.R. Mackenzie have given to this kōrero or this kaupapa around the community that choose to engage with us. We're trying to kind of create a different model of like, please sir, can I have some money to do our thing, as opposed to we're choosing to engage with you as a funder. And so the Ngā Kai Kōkore or the community groups could be anybody within community who are doing initiatives or projects or programs. So it wouldn't be exclusive. And I think within the comms strategy and the community plan around who's aware of it and who knows about the access to this pot of money or this pool of money would be at the discretion of all of the community in Ōtaki going, have you heard of this? A lot of the conversations I have is, oh, you need to talk to Whetu because he's got some access to something. And it's through that relationship that we create the initiatives and the knowledge of what's happening. And through that, we've been able to kind of get involved in front of some really cool projects. But yeah, so it's open to any group. And having a fund holder means that some groups who haven't got a charitable status, which most funders need, means that they can go to a fund holder who holds that charitable status and has those same rigour, but then support them to get that initiative done, which I think for some groups in Ōtaki who are like, oh, I wish I just had like $2,000 so we could do something, means they could come to this fund holder and then do what they want to do to support their health and overall well-being of them and their community group.
Envisage there being a KCDC representative in that group? I'm not worried either way, but just a question.
Yeah, I think it depends on who the fund holders who went into the initiative in the first instance were like, here's the fund holder, you make the decisions as the kai kōkore and the fund holder. I think this next one, depending on the evidence or the research or the report, I think there may be some advisory support or some support that might be warranted, and that to make it a bit more rigorous. That said, what happened was also we believe as funders was really, really good. But if there was a requirement or a desire for a KCDC representative to be in that group, I think it'll be in that discussion phase of what this might look like in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
So my question is around if people have a really good idea but the fund holders don't have enough money, where will the support come from to council or others to support them seeking that funding? Because filling in the forms is actually a big barrier for a lot of things. So I've got a couple of others, but the other thing is, as a council, when we're giving out public money, what is our what feedback or accountability are we going to have from this, and how is that going to be presented? Like, do we get a yearly report, or because we have,
Yeah, absolutely. So the funders too have the same fiduciary and public responsibilities in terms of their funding. Well, similar. The processes are in place in terms of reporting on impact. So there would be collective reporting on impact, and we would be coming back to council with where the money's been spent. One of the important things around this funding too is around being transparent. So who's got the money within that community, and what have they done? What are the activities they've done, and how did it go? What's the impact from that? And we can bring that back to council at the end of the year, or we could come back at an early stage as well around that.
And to your point around if there's no money for the fund holder with this particular at that particular time, again, the philanthropic community is here to support that. And I think just for those groups who are in the wider Wellington region and recognising the Waikanae, Paraparaumu, Paikakariki communities who may not have charitable status or anything like that as well, Wellington Community Fund, I shouldn't really say this, but I'm going to, we have the ability to have a fund holder. If a community group has a fund holder, we can support that fund holder, because that's why a project or pilot like this is not too foreign for us as an organisation. So for communities in those regions, in this region here that you serve, if they've got an idea but don't have charitable status, if there's a fund holder that they want to partner with, we can release that money to the fund holder on their behalf for the community group. So to your point, if there's a group that wants money but don't have status, as long as they have a fund holder, we can potentially support them. Can't guarantee, but that process is open to them.
Kia ora. Are you done, Councillor Warwick? One more? I'm just conscious of time. We're hitting our 11 o'clock break time, so just
with regard to administration, what costs are involved, and do we bear those costs, or does that come out of the fund holder pool of money?
That is in the report. There is a small percentage that is assigned to the administration for the fund holder. Does lead me to a question in regards to that, is what percentage is that?
That's yet to be worked out, because we haven't engaged with the funders at that level of detail, but there is precedent from last time.
Okay.
Last year it was a 15% percentage. 15% was the percentage for the fund holder to administer this. I think depending on the large of the pool, the size of the pool, we could kind of talk to the fund holder about that as a slightly reduced one, depending on the pool of money available, I think. But that's, again, as we work with the fund holder and the funders about what their expectations are around that.
Okay. That seems like more than a small percentage, just observation. We've got online Huriwai. Here's a question. Welcome, Huriwai.
Kia ora. Sorry, I'm just having to stay home today because I was sick after travelling. My question is, just trying to, it's more run around clarity. So I'm just trying to whip my head through it. So the idea in terms of option one, is it sort of like club funding insofar as different or multiple funders fund into this sort of central pot, and then applicants come in seeking funding for their ideas from that central pot? I'm just checking, is that the right approach, that what you're seeking the endorsement from council on?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of the weaknesses noted in the report, sorry, I'm just trying to check which one it is. Is it 19.3? Noting, of course, how you state that this type of approach is different and new for council, and you have noted the time expense that would be involved. I'm just trying to get a sense of confidence or assurance as to how long would this sort of take for council to sort of get enough confidence that this is the right approach to go down, as opposed to the other options that you have outlined.
In terms of the research that's been done and the conversations that we've had, there's enough, the staff team have confidence in the approach at a high level and what we've provided to council. The details in terms of how the decision making would work, the logistics and how we would work out how the process works is something that needs to be figured out. So that, in terms of timing, is something that would take a couple of months. The funders, from our understanding, are keen to go. There's no issue with getting funding going. It's just that we need probably, I would say, 2 months for the first part of this to make sure that the paperwork lines up. So remembering that we already have things in place that we'll be tweaking. We're not starting from scratch with the funders. We've been provided with the collective agreement that they've used previously. We've been provided with reporting templates that they've used previously, and we've gone over those things. So it's a matter of tweaking and making sure it works and it's fit for council's purpose going forward, rather than starting from scratch on those things.
And then just because I just noted from the report where it says 50,000 per annum, but in this first tranche you're looking at 100,000 carried over from FY 22-23 and then inclusive of 23-24. But is there insofar as, just in case timing does go down a track that is unhelpful, is there a risk insofar as a certain decision has to be made before that any part of that funding gets lost, or is it secured?
The funding is available in our budgets for future years. I think what we're pointing to is that this approach is something that we would take a look at. But if your question is the ongoing funding of $50,000 per annum for investment in Ōtaki focused on equity, if that's at risk, I wouldn't say that it's at risk any more than any other part of our council budgets, where we have to look at whether they continue to align with the direction set by the council of the day.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Huriwai. Councillor Pravanov. This will be our last questions I've got, apart from mine.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you everyone who's played a part in getting this paper to us today, and really exciting project. I have two lines of questions. My first one follows up, well, it's actually very similar to what Councillor Warwick's. I'm looking in here in terms of how the reporting occurs, but I suppose to me, I'd also want to see that there are measures in place so that you can actually report against those, so you actually know that the money that is being put here is actually working. And in the report here, it's not actually that clear, and it actually even says about how potentially, I think it's on page 23, about evaluation is going to be iterative, so it may well change. So I sort of, maybe it's the subject matter, but is it difficult to put measures in place now that you can actually targets in place now that you can actually measure against to see that this money is actually going to be well spent? That's my first question.
You referred to page 23, which is the Ōtaki Youth Space report, so the previous item. But,
sorry, yes, I think it was a bit later on.
I guess in reference to this Ōtaki social investment piece.
Yes.
There's a prioritisation process involved in this, and there will be measures set for assessing whether or not the outcomes that the investment seeks to achieve has achieved, and that is something that we apply to our overall social investment program. and something that you'll hear more from us on in the lead up to the next LTP. But I think measurement and evaluation of whether this approach, from a council perspective at least, is achieving what we thought that it would achieve, is inherent in the process that we've outlined for you today.
Okay, thank you for that. My second question, and it was touched on here before in terms of, so this fund is actually basically going, it's the Ōtaki Social Investment Fund. You made the comment that that there may be other areas in the kapiti that could apply for it if they have organisations that are available to do that. So one of the, I suppose, the issues I've raised before is in Waikanae, there's some areas there that have a lower deprivation figure than even Ōtaki, but there's actually no organisation there. Are there ways and means of actually facilitating such an organisation so that, you know, that group and possibly
Councillor
one of others can be...
Provanov, I think this is probably beyond the scope of this report in terms of that question. Could we take that offline and have a chat with staff about that particular thing related to that? That would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So I just have one question. We're talking about a 1-year pilot, and that's 50K, but we're talking about putting 100K in before we've done the 1-year pilot. That doesn't seem to align with what a pilot is about, in my thinking.
It's not putting the whole 100K in at the same time, so it would be putting in 50,000 once we've figured out and finalised the process with the funders and with Ngā Hapu o Ōtaki, so it's robust and it sits well under our social investment priority and the measures and the framework that we have in place around that. So first of all, it's $50,000, and then evaluation happens throughout. So it's an ongoing process. There could be a point 6 months in when you come back to council and say, this is where we're at with evaluation. The idea, the framework behind it is a developmental. So developmental evaluation is an ongoing process. Month by month, we'll be looking at it. And there's 2 levels within that. It's how's it working as a structure for council and the funders and Ngā Hapu o Ōtaki, and what's the impact that we're making within this. There's kind of 2 parts to that. And then the second $50,000 would be later within that financial year to be able to come into that pool of funding.
Great, thank you. So my second probably question around this is a specific around when do we expect to have some reporting back to council around the review and the ongoing evaluation of this project? I assume it potentially would go through the Social Sustainability Committee first?
Correct. So we are asking you to endorse the approach today. We would work via the Social Sustainability Subcommittee in the first instance to provide updates about how things were tracking. If, as part of our ongoing evaluation that Emma has just described, we had concerns about the approach, if you were to approve the approach today, if at any point through our ongoing evaluation we had concerns that we thought required a different decision, we would bring that back to council as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I see no other questions, so although Councillor Wilson, are you offering to move the recommendations?
No, I think our Ōtaki councillor might want to do that, but I'm assuming are you asking for a specific recommendation on one of the options? So I'm assuming that the collaborative option 1 seems...
So the recommendations outline that we are endorsing option 1?
Yeah.
So that's A?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that was what, but just a very quick point of clarification. At the time that this was designed, Ōtaki was different than it is now. So Ōtaki used to include Peka Peka and Te Horo, and it doesn't anymore. That's now Waikanae. So does the scope of this, not Peka Peka, but so does the scope of this, has the geographical barrier changed?
I think you're referring to changes to ward boundaries that happened as part of the representation review. I think the focus for us with Ōtaki projects is more aligned to how the Ōtaki community defines itself and where its boundaries are, rather than where the local government commission defines the boundaries of Ōtaki.
Yeah, that's great, but the Ōtaki community is already defining itself in different ways. I'm more interested in how we define it. So, so the question is, does this include Te Horo, or doesn't it? And regardless of what the government, anybody sets a boundary, what is the cultural boundary? I mean, the former councillor who was driving some of the stuff actually lived in Te Horo. He was the Ōtaki councillor, he lived in Te Horo. And if you asked him, as far as he was concerned, yes, Te Horo was certainly part of this. So my question is it?
I think, in all honesty, we haven't defined the boundaries to that degree yet, but I'm going to ask whether any of the other staff in the room have a perspective they want to offer.
Because I don't know the answer.
Kia ora. Te Horo is still part of Te Horo is still, but also when we're looking at servicing our communities, it would depend on where the organisation is placed, and most organisations in Ōtaki will service other areas outside of the direct Ōtaki, which would include Te Horo.
Great. Councillor Halliday, can I ask, is this a question or are you moving?
Point of clarity, actually.
Okay, I had said we were into the end of that, but I'll allow it.
Number 29 on page 34. How I read that, and I have no issue with this, is there's actually $100,000 that goes in the first year, with the $50,000 following. We're talking about $50,000 in the first year with $100,000 following. But the funding was for the first 2 years, 2022, year ended 2022-23. That's $100,000. In theory, that's what we're putting in to start with, and then the other $50,000 will come after that. But that's not what I've heard, is it?
So the confusion, do you want to answer it, or? Confusion is because we've got 2 financial years involved, one of which is about to finish in 6 weeks' time.
Correct.
And we need to get $50,000 out of our budget.
Actually, we need to get $100,000 out, because this is actually the 2 years, this year and the previous year.
No, it's only 2022-23, so it's this financial year that finishes is the first 50,000. The next 50,000 starts July 2023 through to June 2024.
Which is the final year of the long-term plan.
No, it's not of the social investment funding though. Social investment funding year 1 finishes
I stand corrected. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. So I'm looking for a mover. I will take Councillor Warwick as the first mover. Can I have a seconder for the recommendations? Hold up, I'll get the seconder, which is Councillor Wilson. You have a right of introduction, Councillor Warwick.
I just wanted to ensure that Andre is happy with this.
I'm supporting an excellent report, and obviously want to demonstrate my bias for Ōtaki.
So anything more, Councillor Warwick? So we're open for debate. Anyone? I'd like to throw just a thought in here. I'm conscious we are well over my 11 o'clock time. In terms of debate, I just want to endorse and welcome the work that our staff have put in and the funders have put into exploring new options around funding. From my work in the social and community sector across the Kapiti district, funding and how that works has been very difficult for organisations for a long time. And this excites me to see that we are talking about doing things differently. I can talk from my personal experience that being a fund holder to help another organisation get started and get their good idea happening is possible. It involves a level of collaboration that we are looking to encourage and invite across our communities. between organisations where there is a lack of protecting my patch, and now I'm supporting great ideas that produce great outcomes for our community. And I'm excited by the fact that Council is signalling that we want to support a shift around funding. And I would hear from my sector and my experience of that there would be a fully resounding, yes, I agree, with exploring these different options. So thank you to our staff and to the funders for bringing this to the table and presenting this as something we can endorse today. Councillor Halliday.
I was going to try and say something like that, but I think you very eloquently put it in a way that I don't need to add anything at all. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Wilson.
Basically what you said, except that as the chair of the grants committee for council, and we have various grants committees, this sort of which is an innovative approach actually. So offline, I'd love to have some more chats with you, Whetū. I think this presents a whole exciting range of opportunities for us as funders and on behalf of those who get the funding. So, boom.
And in the light of everyone continuing on from everyone's conversation so far, I think that potentially the learnings we have from this could inform future planning. And this is probably the ultimate outcome of a decision that was made, very difficult decision that was made about 7, 8 years ago to shift our funding model towards social investment funding, which was not well received at the time, but it has opened the door for this further conversation around a complete look at the model of funding that we use and how that produces the outcomes that we so desperately need in our communities. So, having said that, thank you to our mover and seconder. No other debate. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour, aye. Against? That is carried. And at that point, we will adjourn the meeting for our 15-minute break. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Recording stopped.
Sorry, before you whip out, you've got an email with the remit from